All right, welcome everyone. Have you ever looked at a massive skyscraper or a huge bridge and wondered what's really holding it all together? I mean, yeah, there's steel and concrete, but the real glue? It's the contract. For any engineer or QS out there, getting a handle on construction contracts is absolutely crucial. And that's exactly what we're going to break down today.
So, here's the game plan. We'll kick things off with the fundamental balancing act that's at the heart of every single contract. Then, we're going to take a journey right across the risk spectrum, from the super certain lockdown contracts all the way to the ones built for total flexibility. We'll dive into the hybrids in the middle, touch on some long-term partnership models, and then wrap it all up with a nice, clear comparison.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Before we even start talking about specific contract types, we've got to get our heads around the core principle here. See, choosing a contract, it's not just about grabbing some template off a shelf. Nope. It's a huge strategic decision about how you're going to manage risk, cost, and the scope of the project.
So, what are we really talking about when we say construction contract? At its heart, it's the project's official rulebook. It's that legally binding agreement that lays out everything. Who's doing what exactly needs to get built, and this is the big one, how everyone's going to get paid. Okay, now this project triangle you see here, this is maybe the single most important concept we're going to talk about. You have to understand that every contract is a constant trade-off between these three things: cost certainty, project risk, and scope clarity. You can't mess with one corner of this triangle without affecting the other two. Think about it. If you want to lock in your cost, you absolutely have to lock in your scope first. And when you do that, you're shifting the risk of anything unexpected happening. Grasping this simple idea is the key to everything else we're going to. All right, so let's start at one end of the spectrum. We're talking about contracts where the number one absolute priority is knowing exactly what the final price will be before a single shovel hits the ground. And to get that certainty, well, it means the owner is basically pushing most of the financial risk over to the contractor's side of the table.
And the classic example of this is the lump sum contract, sometimes called a fixed price contract. I mean, the name pretty much says it all, right? It's one single price for the entire job, period. This gives the owner an incredible amount of peace of mind when it comes to the budget. But, and this is a big but, look at that trade-off. The contractor is taking on a massive amount of risk. If they get their numbers wrong or if unexpected problems pop up, tough. They have to eat that cost. That's why this model really only works when the design is 100% complete and locked in stone, like for a standard building project.
Now, if we take that same idea and push it even further, we get to EPC contracts. That stands for engineering, procurement, and construction. You'll also hear these called turnkey contracts, and the principle is basically the same, just on a bigger scale. You have one single contractor who takes responsibility for, well, everything. They design it, they buy all the stuff, they build it, and then they hand over a facility that's ready to go. The owner literally just has to turn the key. Again, cost certainty for the owner is super high, which means, you guessed it, the risk for the contractor is also through the roof. This is the contract you'll see for really complex stuff like big industrial plants or power stations. Okay, so now let's do a complete 180 and swing to the total opposite end of the spectrum. So what happens when you don't know the full scope? Or maybe you're in a huge rush and you need to start building right now, even though the designs aren't finished. Well, this is where you need a contract built for flexibility. But the price of that flexibility is that the owner has to be willing to take on a lot more of the cost risk.
This is where you'll find contracts like cost reimbursable or time-and-material, often called T&M. The idea here is really simple. The contractor gets paid back for their actual costs, all the labor, all the materials, whatever it takes, plus some kind of agreed-upon fee for their work. Now, this means the owner is carrying pretty much all the risk for cost overruns. So why on earth would you use this? Well, it's perfect for those situations where defining the scope upfront is just impossible. Think emergency repairs after a storm, or for those super fast-track projects where getting started yesterday is the most important thing.
But of course, most projects don't live on those extreme ends of the spectrum, right? Most of the time we're somewhere in the middle. And that brings us to the middle ground, these really interesting hybrid contracts that are designed to share the risk and responsibility between the owner and the contractor.
A classic example here is the unit rate contract. The way this works is both sides agree on a price for each unit of work. So, for example, a certain price per cubic meter of concrete or per meter of pipe that gets laid. The final cost of the project, it's just the actual number of units you end up using times that pre-agreed rate. It's a really smart way to share the risk. This is the go-to for big civil engineering jobs, like roads or pipelines, where you know what you're building, but you're not 100% sure on the final quantities until you're actually out there digging.
Another really great one in this middle ground category is the Guaranteed Maximum Price, or GMP contract. The best way to think about this one is like a cost reimbursable contract, but with a safety net for the owner. So the contractor gets paid for their actual costs, but only up to a certain cap, a ceiling that they can't go over. But here's the really clever part. There's usually an incentive. If the project costs less than the GMP, the owner and the contractor get to split the savings. It's a fantastic way to encourage the contractor to be efficient, while still giving the owner that all-important cost cap.
Okay, now for something that's, well, it's pretty revolutionary actually. It's called Integrated Project Delivery, or IPD. And really, this is more than just a contract type, it's a whole different way of thinking. You get the owner, the designer, and the contractor all to sign a single agreement. They literally become one team. They sink or swim together, sharing all the risks and all the rewards. What this does is it completely gets rid of that old school adversarial us versus them attitude. Suddenly, everyone is laser focused on what's best for the project as a whole. It's an amazing model for super complex or innovative projects where you need that deep collaboration.
All right, so pretty much everything we've looked at so far has been about designing and building something. But what about contracts that go way beyond that? Some contracts cover the entire life of an asset. We're talking decades-long agreements with massive financial commitments.
And that brings us into the world of Build, Operate, Transfer, or BOT contracts. You'll often see these as part of a public-private partnership, a PPP. It works just like the name says. First, a private company finances and builds a huge asset, like a toll road or a bridge. Then they get to operate it for a really long time. We're talking maybe 20, 30 years, and they collect the revenue from it. And then finally, at the end of that period, they transfer the asset back to the government or the public owner. As you can imagine, the amount of risk the developer takes on here is just astronomical. It covers decades of potential issues with both construction and operations.
Okay, wow, we have covered a lot of ground, haven't we? From the total certainty of a fixed price all the way to these super collaborative partnerships. So now, let's pull it all together. We're going to look at a summary that puts everything side by side so you can see the whole picture in one go.
Think of this table as your ultimate cheat sheet. It lays it all out, and you can really see that relationship we talked about right at the beginning. Look at the top, lump sum. It gives the owner that very high cost certainty. But the trade-off is you need very high scope clarity and you're putting very high risk on the contractor. Then jump down to the other end, cost reimbursable. Low certainty for the owner, but also low risk for the contractor. And then right there in the sweet spot in the middle, you've got your balanced, shared risk models like unit rate and GMP. This table really just visualizes that entire spectrum of risk we've been talking about.
So what's the big takeaway from all of this? It's that there is no single best contract. It just doesn't exist. The right choice is always the one that fits your specific project's needs. You know, its complexity, how fast you need it done, and just how much risk everyone is willing to take on. And that really just leaves us with the one question you have to ask yourself every single time. For your next project, where on this risk spectrum do you really need to be?